Hey, Chapter 9, Middle Childhood Physical and Cognitive Development. Oh, and we know, which one can't see that? There we go. You know that growth slows a bit in middle childhood. Middle childhood is considered 6 years old to 11, and I'm about to have one going into middle childhood and one about to turn 10. I cannot believe that's happening. A lot of times the heads are bigger and proportions are changing. Baby teeth start to come out and muscle mass increases. And the brain develops a great deal at this stage of development. Children are starting to be able to reason and plan and communicate. They can pay attention to the environment, analyze kind of what could happen. So they're looking at consequences and they're able to have more self-control. You can see this getting out of that toddlerhood, early childhood phase and moving into this. One of the reasons we did not put Grayson in kindergarten when he was turning on, going to be 5, is because we knew that when he was older, he would be able to calm himself and have more self-control than as a boy turning 5. So he'll be 6, so just turned 6 when he goes into kindergarten. So also, a lot of brain development, like I said, billions of interactions of different parts happening in the brain, the myelination and pruning of the neurons. In the myelination is where the glial cells grow around the axon of the nerve cell. You remember the diagram? We learned that earlier. You learned that probably in undergrad. And it's kind of what's known as a myelin sheath, and it helps the neurons to communicate. So that you can see that there's more communication going on in the brain from left and right, able to access other systems of the brain more easily and more quickly. Additionally, pruning. This is where the brain gets rid of what it doesn't need. It just kind of prunes it off, or unnecessary things that we don't need. And then automation is the strengthening of neural connections. It's, of course, that we talked about before, the way that this happens is really important because if there's some kind of trauma or any other issue that is affecting brain development, then these areas will not be at their optimal level. Motor development, gross motor development in this stage. So as you're getting into middle childhood, these areas of the brain are continuing to grow and develop with the myelination and the pruning off of what's not necessary and automation. And those parts of the brain that are responsible for gross motor development are the cerebral cortex, cerebellum, and that part of the brain. So basically, you see that children have those big movements, right? The catching, the jumping, the riding the bikes, all those things. Those are becoming more stable and kids are more likely to be able to play a sport. So that's why you don't see a lot of t-ball and soccer and stuff like that until about 4 or 5 years old. So 4 is kind of a nightmare. And how many of you are with sports? And that's why you have to have t-ball because kids usually don't have hand-eye coordination when they're 4. But when they get go. I've been a little under the weather this weekend, so I'm going to go ahead and apologize for my voice and my brain. Let me get back to what I was saying. So you see that when they get into about 5, 6, especially 6, that they're much better at these sports. It's because of that gross motor development. And then, of course, fine motor development, you start to see that to greatly increase those abilities. You see these fine motor skills really worked on. We talked about this, very much worked on in pre-K and in kindergarten with the cutting and the holding a pencil and being able to do arts and crafts like by cutting and gluing and coloring and all of those things, right? So it's really, really important. And then those peers who are not developing and are not able to do those things are typically shunned by peers. It's really sad because there's usually probably something else going on, right? Right. All right, let's move to physical. Sometimes I think it's better this way so you can see the slide. I can make it bigger. No one's told me yet, I don't think, what they like, but maybe you will. But we have physical activity, play, and sports. We've talked about this. I feel like I'm kind of beating a dead horse, but we constantly are talking about in all stages of development, the children need play. One of the worst things that's happened to me is our lack of play in the schools. It's been an interesting development during the pandemic to see all the children, how they've grown from being able to have unrestricted free play for so much of the day. But children need at least 60 minutes of physical activity per day. I think it should be, it's probably more than that. But um, when entering middle childhood, much of the physical activity is rough and tumble, running, chasing, wrestling, etc. And it is a very pro-social activity that helps children to build relationships and practice assertiveness and learn how to have fun, but also burns energy, which is really, really important. So I'll say super important for bone strengthening for children to be able to play and run around, and also team sports, getting them involved in that helps them to understand how to communicate, cooperate with others, learn to play well with others, right? Those are skills they'll use for the rest of their life. And very, very important that children have the opportunity to do and experience these types of activities. And we know that diet, nutrition, and weight are so important, and that childhood obesity is on the rise. There's a big campaign for My Plate to help people to understand what types of things should go on their plate. You have a visual there of fruits, grains, protein, vegetables, dairy. Um, Children in middle childhood need to consume between 1,200 and 22 calories per day. And if they're having Pop Tarts for breakfast and they're not eating lunch, or they're eating a candy bar and they're eating cookies and candy all the time and stuff like that, and chicken fingers and French fries, then that's not going to be what they're getting. They're not going to have any of the things they need for their brain to grow and develop, and they're going to potentially become obese. Obesity is highly linked to a lot of health issues, very difficult for them later on in life, and a risk for the long term for them. Adolescent. I don't think I said anything about this, but of course everybody knows what BMI, body mass index is. It gives you the equation for how to figure that out here on page 219. But I think every one of us have been to the doctor and they give you your BMI. Most of you probably don't care so much about it yet. But when you get to be my age, the doctor will say, "Hey, you're right here on the edge. But there's a range of where you're supposed to be for your height and weight." So yes, great conversation. Um, like I said, obesity has increased. Accidents. I said adolescence a minute ago. And no, I don't think I have coronavirus. I was thinking earlier that you guys, when you're listening to this, you may think, what? You've been ill. I think it was a 24-hour bug. Although when I first got sick Friday, I was concerned that perhaps it was coronavirus, but now I feel better, and I think it was just a little bug. So, yeah, I don't want anybody to be worried. But I guess good thing for safety that I'm recording this and not in front of you. So let's talk about accidents and illness. So the death rate for middle childhood is very low. It's the lowest. It's much lower than early childhood and adolescence, which makes a lot of sense. But the number one cause of death is an accident. So in the United States in 2009, almost 1,000 children died as a result of motor vehicle accidents, and 700 died from other types of accidents. Bicycle accidents, sports injuries, automobile accidents, etc. Things like making sure that you wear your helmet and wear your safety belt and stay in your booster seat until you're old enough to be out of it safely. Childhood cancer is the second leading cause of death in middle childhood. It's risen mostly with leukemia, um, which affects the white blood cells, endocrine and lymph systems, the brain and nervous system, and bones. The survival rate continues to improve. And there's a little story about a cancer survivor in the book that's good about Wes. Um, and children do get sick and have chronic issues. Some of the chronic ones are the ones that we see the most are things like asthma, allergies, ADHD. Let me get started on ADHD again, do you? So, okay. Remember I think I went off about that earlier. All right, we're moving into cognitive, just so you're cognitive development, just so you're following along with me. We're into Piaget here, concrete operations. Remember, we talked about how much I need you to know Piaget. Everything about Piaget, right? And why? NCE, CPC. I think I told you guys the scores that you get like a 90% pass rate on the CPC this year. You guys should be very excited about that. That means something good's happening. that means that means that it's a good percentage. But anyway, that's almost everyone passed. So that's excellent news for you guys. Um, all right, back to PJ. So we're moving from pre-operational to concrete operations in Piaget's stages of development. These are from approximately ages 7 through 11 or most of middle childhood. This is where you move into concrete operation stage. And this is also in the case example in your book about Rebecca will help you to understand the conceptualization of this concept. In middle childhood, children are less egocentric. They understand the spatial concepts better and they appreciate more. They can understand a cause and effect relationship. So they're able to use more reason and logic and solve concrete problems, whereas they weren't able to do that before. So here are the different concepts of that. They can, at this stage, use reversibility. They can undo or reverse an action. They can note that clay that they've seen transform from a ball to a rope can be transformed back to a ball. They can reverse it back, like using Play-Doh. In grouping, the child's ability to sort objects by various dimensions, such as color or shape. They can categorize, right, and sort, and they can understand that. They can they can have different categories of colors or shapes. They can focus on more than one dimension at a time, and that's sometimes referred to as decentration. Decentration. Then you have seriation, and that's being able to arrange items in order along a quantitative dimension. This is for younger children, it's necessary to physically compare each item to the others in order to complete this task. However, by 7 or 8, children no longer need the physical comparison and they can do the task very quickly. So they're arranging items in order along quantitative dimensions such as height. They're able to conceptualize that concept. Transivity is a more sophisticated variation of seriation. That's the one we talked about a second ago. That requires more of a relationship among items in the series. For example, if asked to consider 3 blocks, a red one, a yellow one, and a blue one, and told that the blue block is the heaviest and the yellow block is the lightest, the concrete operational child will understand that the red block is heavier than the yellow and lighter than the blue. So that is a more complex type of grouping and understanding of the task. An additional concept related to grouping is class inclusion. Mastery of this concept involves the ability to perceive part-whole relationships and have categories and subcategories. So, for example, while waiting for an amusement park ride in a line consisting of 3 girls and 6 boys, and asked whether there are more boys or more children on the line, a pre-operational child is likely to say there are more boys. This conclusion is influenced by the younger child's consideration of only one dimension. By 8, you're able to reason as children that both boys and girls are subclasses of the category of children. There's a case example about grace here on page 223 before you get into conservation of time. And conservation is the understanding that quantities do not change regardless of appearances. This is why in school and conservation you start to learn area and volume, etc. And things such as that nature. You can understand those concepts. I think Helen started learning that in 3rd grade, not even 2nd, and time. Being able to tell time comes after children gain the concept of seriation. Remember that one back up there, which you can arrange in quantitative order? My son Gray is still not able to tell time yet. He's starting to learn, but he has a difficult. He engages by what we're doing in a day and different. We had breakfast and what time, that kind of thing. If I ever tell him sometimes that it's almost nighttime when it's still light out, sometimes he doesn't understand that. So that starts to come a little bit later. Like they start to understand time, right? All right, what's next? Information processing. The most notable thing about information processing in middle childhood is that in middle childhood, um, there is a lot of advancement in cognitive processing and attention and processing speed, where they're able to retain and get things faster and pay attention for longer. Their attention span is much bigger than in early childhood. Cognitive processes. So these cognitive processes that are developing in middle childhood. Um, Remember, attention, just as a review, is the primary process through which the sensory memory. That I remember everything coming in through the senses. We talked about that. Moves to working memory, and then the information is retained and manipulated in the working memory, going on to the next stage. We know that the ability to have selective attention in middle childhood increases quite a bit. Children are able to focus on what is relevant and screen out that other irrelevant information. Like let's say there's somebody that's being disruptive or making noise on the side of the classroom, and the child is able to continue to pay attention to the teacher and screen that out, or be able to focus on what someone's saying and screen out what other people are saying. I'll say processing speed. That's increasing. Quicker at responding, performing mental activities without very little effort at all, very fast on automatic processing strategies. So more deliberate, less automatic mental activities that are involved in learning and moving information to long-term memory. Several things, strategies gain sophistication during the school years. Rehearsal, organization, and elaboration are the three that become a lot more sophisticated, the strategies. Rehearsal, we've talked about before, is the repetition of information, right? That we've all learned to use things of holding that information. And then we go to organization. And this is where we are learning to organize in our brain and able to recall it later. In later elementary years and middle school, children are more intentional about learning and organizing information. It's a lot more sophisticated. And then elaboration involves reasoning, logic, and sometimes imagination. Imagination. For example, a child might find it easier to remember that the new soccer coach's last name is Cletus if the coach can be visualized putting on cleats in preparation for a game. And we've all used those little strategies to learn things. You probably do it for these classes, but you haven't always been able to do that. It happened in middle childhood where it started. Metacognition is the knowledge about cognitive states or processes. It begins to emerge at around age 8 and it expands across. And all that is really what I just talked about in ways that you are working to deliberately learn and remember and strategize and organize and have tricks to remember things and categorizing all in your brain so that you can bring it up later on. Language development is next. Of course, that large vocabulary increase, fluent, mastering function words, such as prepositions and conjunctions, cognitive maturity, they can consider the perspective of listeners, and it plays a huge role in their social development. And we know through intelligence that the IQ remains stable from childhood up through your entire life. The way that intelligence is measured is through an intelligence quotient, which is the measure of intellectual functioning as an expression of the individual's mental capacity at any given point compared to others the same age. Really important to note that things affect intelligence, such as prolonged illnesses, poverty, parental involvement, and things such as that. One way to praise children is to not focus on them being smart, but on more of the effort on what they did, which can help them to develop in a healthy way. Exceptionalities or outliers. are other issues or children who score low, below 70 on the IQ test. And there may be some limitations in their intellectual functioning or some other things that I just talked about, like um, perhaps poverty or other trauma, things that are going on in their life that are prohibiting them from excelling. It may not be like a developmental disability. And then there are also learning disabilities. About 5% of children enrolled in school receive some services for disabilities. Um, ADHD, here we are again, right? Um, Research suggests ADHD is a disorder of self-regulation. And you already know Dr. Beale's thoughts on ADHD. I think it often is something else. I do think there is ADHD, and I believe in it, but I do think it is often other things that are going on with the child. Luckily, we're going to learn more about that in Chapter 10 with disruptive behavior disorders. So I'm looking forward to diving into that next. It's a short chapter. I'm sure you're thrilled. I think for today, I want to do these reflection questions. I couldn't really think of anything I wanted to talk about, but just answer. Let's see. Let's do this one. What measures can counselors take to help prevent avoidable accidents with children? So this is forum response number 9. What measures can counselors take to help prevent avoidable accidents with children? And what can they do in working with parents, children, and schools? It's going to be a good one. That'll be interesting. And it's applicable to what you're going to be doing. All right, you did it. 21 minutes. That's not bad. Hopefully you made it through.